We're having our student panel now, and we did our first student panel. We do a leaders meeting every late November, early December in Chicago O'Hare Airport. And this year there was over 50 people showed up, and we had our first student panel. And it was one of the highlights of our leaders meeting, and it was a great meeting. And so I'm really thrilled to be able to bring our students on. So Molly, will you come on up? And Molly Ames, I'm just going to introduce Molly, and who is our moderator, and she will introduce all of the students. So Molly Ames is a reporter for Learning Well magazine, where she writes about well-being and higher education. She previously covered student mental health for the Mary Christie Quarterly magazine and podcast. And in 22, she graduated from Harvard with highest honors in history and literature and Near Eastern languages and civilizations. And you were also a staff reporter, I believe, on the Crimson. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. Great. So thank you, Molly. It's all yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's very exciting to be here with you today and also to be able to moderate this panel. I will start us off with some introductions for our fabulous panelists, and then we'll dive into the conversation, and we're making sure to leave plenty of time for your own questions and for Q&A at the end. So our first panelist is Carson Domi. Carson has been involved in advocacy work for more than half his life, with a focus on mental health that began when he lost a friend to suicide in 2018. He's now a junior at the University of Texas at Austin, studying government and still somehow making time to serve on boards of multiple nonprofits that address health issues, including suicide prevention and irritable bowel disease. He's also the executive director of the Coalition for Student Wellbeing, which is an organization dedicated to bridging the gap between students and decision makers through advocacy, education, and collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carson. We also have Hansini Ramachandran, who is a sophomore and a merit scholar at the University of Southern California, where she majors in electrical and computer engineering with a minor in dance. She has been the teaching assistant for multiple electrical engineering courses, studied abroad in Sydney, and driven by her interest in technology and medicine, conducts research into flexible, integrated devices for electrochemical sensing. She is also passionate about dance and music and has performed and competed as a soloist for 6 years now. So, thank you, Nancy. And last but far from least, we have Anissa Steele, who's a senior here at the University of Miami studying psychology and immunology. She's vice chair of the Counseling Outreach Peer Education, or COPE, and also outreach chair for the Arab Students Union. In her role at COPE, she's become an expert in connecting with diverse student populations to provide empathetic, non-judgmental support during one-on-one interactions as well as group discussions. And she's passionate about destigmatizing mental health, normalizing help-seeking, and is striving to create a supportive and open campus environment. So we are very happy and privileged to have all of them, and I'm excited to hear what they have to say. All right. So this panel is navigating student mental health in a changing world. One of the changes with Gen Z, or a trend that is unique to you, maybe I should say us, is what we're seeing as an increasing kind of tendency to avoid risk. So my question for you is, how are you seeing that play out potentially in your own lives, on your campuses, and how might that kind of culture of caution be complicating or affecting your own ability to navigate the uncertainties of adulthood and becoming an adult? So Hansini, we can start with you and then go from there.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it is true that I definitely grew up in a very sheltered environment, especially also being a woman. We were always told, you got to be extra careful, don't go out alone, don't go out at night. I always have my pepper spray on me. I mean, I go to school in USC and it's a safe campus, but downtown LA is not the safest. I will share a story actually in my junior year when we were touring colleges, my parents didn't even get out of the car to see USC because they were like, no, too risky, too unsafe. What do you know? I'm there now. And it is very safe on campus, but this goes to say that I've just grown up in such an environment that prioritizes safety that sometimes it's hard to burst out of that bubble. And I think that mindset has transferred. Obviously, these precautionary measures are great, but sometimes in order to learn, how to really adult or to get out of your comfort zone, it's important to kind of forget that a little bit. And sometimes you have to learn the hard way. And I think this mindset has transferred into other things, like me and my peers choosing courses that have good rate my professors and are easy A's rather than things that we're genuinely interested in. Because now, it's such a competitive environment, right? Everything matters, every grade matters. So do we really want, again, it's the fixed and growth mindset that we're talking about, right? Do we just want to get the A and then move on and then be safe rather than sorry? Or do we want to really challenge ourselves, take the hit now and then learn, do something we like? And coming to the second part of your question, navigating the uncertainties of adulthood, I think. I think it's made it harder. I was constantly physically and emotionally surrounded by my family, right, in the Bay Area, and I was really heartbroken to have to move to LA at first. And so everything from meals, opportunities, friends, classes, everything was so uncertain. It was kind of hard to grapple with. And so one way I've tried to tackle that is by purposely pushing myself to go out of my comfort zone and engage in experiences that are very uncertain, but that also have guardrails. So one example of that has been study abroad for me. And kind of on the other side of that program, I think it takes that one experience where you push yourself to kind of gain self-efficacy for navigating life.
Thank you. And Anissa or Carson, is there anything you want to add? Does any of that resonate with you in terms of kind of potentially avoiding risk, wanting to try new things, but also being uncertain or uncomfortable with what the outcome might be, or any other thoughts you might have?
I think for me, I really resonate with that whole living in a bubble and like having that sheltered mindset, because I come from a family of immigrants, and a big thing for us is perhaps being like having a fear of being perceived, and a lot of our actions kind of being misconstrued. So that means not pushing ourselves to do like more creative pursuits because we're supposed to be more STEM focused. And it's a big thing kind of creating this image for yourself, and it's very hard to kind of break out of that and kind of develop into the young adult you want to be because you're so fixated on what you should be.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's so great to be here with all of you. I really appreciate the interest of you all to be here, especially on the day kind of focused around well-being, and appreciate all the work Dana, Marjorie, and the staff have done for this. But to kind of get at the question, I actually just on the bus ride over, Chancellor Grasso and I were talking about how we went to the same high school in the Northeast, and we're talking about how some kids are starting to go out of state more often. And I think this is actually an interesting opportunity to give props to a little bit of the digital world that we live in, something I admittedly don't often do. I grew up in Massachusetts, and I had a lot of medical stuff growing up. I was missing about 50 days of school all the way from middle school till about sophomore year of high school when we were online. And so when my college search came, I really wasn't looking outside of the Northeast. And thank God I had practically my older brother, my best friend, was like, apply to Texas, let's see how you're doing health-wise. And, I'm sure Mary Murphy can attest, it's probably a great decision for both of us. But the sense of, there was a little bit of digital safety, kind of safety net provided by the digital world of, having access to meet people before I got on campus. I mean, when I chose Texas, I didn't know a single person, I'm not even joking, a single person at the campus, let alone the whole state of Texas. So I'd say that's been a kind of positive of enabling me to take more risk. But we'll get into the digital stuff later, I'm sure. So I'll give them credit where credit's due first.
Indeed, we will. And thank you for that lead up into the next question, which thinking about, change and the trends of Gen Z, of course, social media is a huge part of life and growing up now. People are more connected than ever, which certainly has its perks, but at the same time, Gen Z is reporting being more lonely than previous generations. So for you all, what are the ways that you think colleges and universities can help connect not only students, but also kind of foster a deeper connection between students and faculty. And then also, what might you be doing, or what can students or young people do to push back against that kind of isolation or hyper-individualism? And Carson, because you led us here, love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, first on the institutional side, UT Austin does honestly a remarkable job, in my opinion, of making such a big school, 53,000 person school, feel like such a great community. Every incoming freshman, regardless of what college within the university you're in, is required to be a part of some sort of first-year interest group. And basically, these are people that you might be taking a couple classes with them if your FIG is the acronym for it, is more tailored towards your major, or like mine was a little bit more kind of focused on the liberal arts. But the biggest opportunity for that is A, getting exposed to the resources on campus, but I would say the most impactful had to have been the peer mentorship element of it. And I'm sure we'll get to mental health as well. We've seen an explosion of positive feedback around peer support around mental health, but simply for things like transitioning to college, it was so useful to have a lady, her name's Isabel, still keep in touch with her even though she's graduated. She was a junior when I was a freshman, and we kind of had a small group where we'd meet once a week in addition to our 1 hour FIG class. It just really helped with resource navigation for campuses. And so I think it's something that this group in particular is poised to take an interest in, to look into your campuses, and I'm sure many of you do this, but look at opportunities of how we can foster in-person connection like that when people are transitioning to college, and to quickly address that question on an individual basis. I think the biggest double-edged sword of the digital world has to be the amount of media that we're all exposed to. I don't think there's any doubt that our generation is kind of getting desensitized to growing up in historical times. I think we can all agree on that. But for me, it's kind of taking and putting those barriers on like news intake and stuff, of like realizing like, yeah, sure, I'm an ambitious person, but you can't solve every world problem, right? And I hate to sound so negative, but I think it's something that I wish some of my peers realized a little bit more, for the sake of our own health, because if we're not taking care of ourselves, we can't take care of others.
And Anissa, going off of the kind of peer support element, I'm sure you have experience there, but also what are your thoughts on kind of students pushing back on the kind of isolation that they're feeling?
I think what I've seen in a lot of my peers, the way that they've pushed back against the hyper-individualistic mindset of Western society is kind of cultivating these third spaces for themselves. So that means joining little clubs like gardening or running to kind of find that sense of community. Because while individualism is beautiful in some aspects, I think kind of going into that far extreme is really detrimental to how we are as social creatures. And kind of seeing my friends trying their hardest to build those genuine connections is really beautiful, especially in the presence of social media, where we feel like very disconnected and we don't fully understand how that person is outside of what they're showing us on their profile. And kind of like tying into the peer-to-peer support, I can see even in the University of Miami's like individual orgs, our cultural orgs, they love to collaborate with each other and kind of bring together the different aspects that kind of, you can see the beauty in each culture. For example, we see a lot of collaborations between like the Latino students and the Black students, and you get to see the overlap in that, and you get to see that you're not alone in this world, and that we have a lot of things that bring us together rather than divide us.
And Simi, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I echo what you said about trying to make a big school seem small. I think USC does a great job of that too. We, at least in the engineering department, we have a mandatory first semester class called Engineering Freshman Academy, where engineers from kind of all disciplines who are freshmen are put together in one class, and they go through one semester of engineering design, how to use the makerspace, interacting with a professor that's actually teaching other classes as well, kind of getting mentorship from that, going through a creative project, interacting with their group members. And they also have 2 mentors who are upperclassmen. And so I think that's a great way for, cultivating those relationships and feeling less lonely when you first come to college as an engineering major, as a freshman. Another thing that I know the EE department does is once or twice a semester, they'll have like a taco social or something like that, where faculty, students, undergrad and grad, everyone just comes, and it's a place to meet and hang out with your peers and faculty outside of class. Because no matter the relationship you have with your professor, if it's in class, right? And if it's out of class, that's just another opportunity to meet them, to talk to them, to talk about something that's perhaps not the subject you're learning. And then coming to loneliness, I mean, social media creating that environment is one thing, but I also think that because of the emphasis on, midterm exams, final exams, all being individual assessments, at least in the engineering curriculum, that creates a culture of, it could be seen as independence, but also loneliness, right? It's very individual. You're kind of on your own, and like we've been talking about, you end up competing with your peers for grades and things like that. So I think having more group projects, having the continuous assessment that Dr. Mazur was talking about yesterday, that could help with forming a community and getting rid of that loneliness.
Right. Yeah, collaboration, and also what you were saying about bringing kind of undergrads and grad students together. Seems like a great opportunity that college students don't always get to sort of have that access to older students pursuing paths that they might want to take also. So we've talked about some of the kind of interpersonal elements affecting well-being and playing out in your lives in college, but I wonder too how are more external forces, so recent global events, whether, of course, the pandemic or political shifts or climate change, how might those be affecting your mental health and sense of stability right now? So Anissa, if you want to kick us off.
I think for me, especially being a student of color, especially as like a Black female student, it's very hard to pretend that the external forces around me are acting independent and that they have no bearing on my mental health. I would say especially in my senior year of high school, witnessing the peak of Black Lives Matter and watching my fellow peers kind of debate the importance of Black lives in America really took a toll on my mental health. And I think as I've matured and I've grown up, I've come to realize that a big part of mental health advocacy is understanding the individual identity of the people that you're working with and kind of bridging the concepts and really understanding who they are. Because to pretend that someone's identity has no influence on how they navigate this world is to be completely naive. And I think with what we've been doing on the University of Miami's campus, with our individual initiatives for Arab students, Latino students, Black students, we've really made a concerted effort at understanding how everyone's been navigating their world and how the shift from young adulthood into adulthood, going into the job force, and really understanding how your identities play a role and how you're navigating these systems has been really beneficial to the overall community.
And Carson?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot going on, right? I just got back from a trip over spring break, spent spring break up on Capitol Hill, chatting with an advocacy group and legislators around funding for the Pell Grant. Funding for support, federal aid for student parents, student veterans. I think there's such a critical time to meet the moment, when it comes to advocacy. And I think a lot of that comes with partnering with all of you, partnering with educators and partnering with administrators, because, I don't know how we're gonna get through without that. And I think, spending time with about 120 mainly, non-traditional college students, hearing about their stories, people that, a degree is going to change the trajectory of not just their lives, but, their children's lives, over break really gave me so much perspective into not just the privilege of getting to do this advocacy work, but the necessity of it. And I think in the upcoming, months and years to come. So I think really the biggest thing that hits me with that is it's a call to unity and a call to action.
And would you say that your sort of own advocacy or participation in that is helpful for your own well-being and kind of sense of?
Some days more than others. There are some days where it's like, what are we doing? I ask that to myself and ask that of others. But, I think for me, losing a close friend to suicide in high school, it's definitely, there's no lack of motivation. And one of the, most serendipitous, beautiful, ugly, parts of mental health advocacy and suicide prevention is hearing the stories of others, right? Like I joke around, I work on mental health and I work on gut health, and I bet almost every single one of you is impacted by at least one, if not both of those. And so, hearing the stories of others only gives me more passion to get in this fight and make sure that we're doing the work that we need to do to save lives.
Thank you.
Yeah, as someone that's actively involved in research and who wants to do a PhD in the future, I think the research cuts, the budget cuts, are very concerning. A lot, me and my peers, so we have this program at USC that funds undergraduate research. And so it's an opportunity for freshmen and sophomore to get involved in research, but also get a stipend for it, right? So you can spend those 7 hours a week not doing a work study or working a job, and you can engage in a high impact experience like research. And so these budget cuts are going to, on the flip side, limit students who can participate in these experiences. And so it's concerning for sure.
And so along that line, what do you think are the biggest kind of challenges for you to maintain your mental health on college or while in college so far? And are there sort of institutional, structural barriers that make that harder? So Hansina will just continue with you.
Yeah, so maybe a slightly tangential topic. I think my mental health and well-being is very directly correlated to the amount of time I get to sing and dance. And so as a sophomore taking 4 300 level EE classes, I don't have time every day. I really don't. And at the same time, going back to what we were talking about, a fixed mindset and being safe rather than sorry and risk avoidance, there's this little voice in the back of my head that's like, if you spend this 1 hour dancing, that's 1 hour less you can spend on EE and studying for an exam or a lab. And, God forbid, an exam doesn't go well, that's because I spent the hour dancing. It's not because the exam was hard or, something else went wrong. But that blame always comes back on that. So it's like, it's a constant battle because I know that that's what makes me fulfilled. The weeks I spend doing EE all week, I'm drained, I'm not fulfilled. But finding time for that has been very difficult. And, especially with students that do very, niche styles that aren't mainstream, right? Even with the dance minor, the programs and, courses and faculty at the school are very, mainstream, Western. And so finding that niche has been hard. So it's more like practicing myself, which makes it even harder, right? To find time for it. So that's to my thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you want to go?
No, you're good.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a juggling act, right? And I mean, y'all face the same thing as faculty, too. It's just a bit different for students. I mean, I so resonate with you. I think it's funny if you tell my friends this in high school, but my college outlet has became running.
Yeah.
It's just, we're, fortunate in Austin, have a beautiful city for it. But it's such a balancing act. I mean, even, coming here, don't get me wrong, I wasn't going to miss this, but I'm taking 12 hours of classes. I'm working probably 35-ish hours a week between 2 different positions and studying for the LSAT all at the same time. So hence the midnight arrival and 5 p.m. will hopefully departure. So it's all about balance, but I think, we all do this work because we know how important it is. And, I think there's passion to be found in it. So, really looking forward to chatting with some of you in the rest of the day of, how all 3 of us really can work with, you and your campuses and some of the institutions that you represent to partner in this work.
Honestly, I think they said it both beautifully. They really encompass the student experience, so I really have nothing to add.
Great. Thinking, I guess, colleges and universities have been rethinking their own approach to mental health. So in the spirit of collaboration, do you guys have ideas about a certain, whether it be policy, program, or sort of cultural element that you might like to redesign or that you would kind of add or maybe eliminate from your own institution? Carson, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I'll asterisk with the first one of, I know this is a big college audience, but I think so much of this stuff around mental health starts with K through 12. One of the kind of proudest advocacy initiatives I've been working on was in my home state of Massachusetts to amend the definition of physical education to include mental health education. 3-paragraph bill, kind of purposefully ambiguous, does exactly that. We need to teach people at obviously an age-appropriate level as they progress through the K through 12 education system of how to take care of yourselves. I hate to say it, but I'm sure all three of us can agree there are some classes that we probably have to take that are much less useful uses of our time, than learning how to simply take care of yourself. And, social emotional learning is huge. So I think on the K through 12 front, if I could wave a little policy wand, I always say it would be that. But on the higher ed perspective, I think so much of it is, and I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, is holistic education, right? Really balancing inside the classroom learning and outside of the classroom learning, and making sure that students are able to develop socially just as much as they are academically. And so I think programs kind of like we all talked about, the different programs that our institutions have around first year immersion programs, trying to expose students to what the school has to offer and what resources are available. I think that that's definitely an actionable thing that universities can take to look at, of how do we really connect our campus. And if campuses like ours, Miami, USC, and UT, all in the tens of thousands of students, I'm sure we can all do that at each of our campuses.
Should we go down the line? Do you have anything to add, Sina?
Yeah, I think some things that were talked about in this conference, like integrating. So I think one thing that's a lot for students to handle is, kind of finding that purpose. Like, yeah, I'm here in college. I'm taking classes because I have to. I'm taking these classes because they're the prereqs for the next classes. But then why? What's the bigger picture? Why am I doing this? And so possibly integrating some of that Life by Design into our Engineering Freshman Academy course could be incredibly useful. And the other thing I was thinking about is, I guess this isn't like institutional policy, but things that faculty could do. I presume that most of my faculty have chosen that profession because they want to make change, right? They want to impact the next generation. So having talks like this and data that proves that, these faculty-student relationships, faculty like all of you that are going above and beyond to create that really transformational experience for students, can really impact them. And so having faculty kind of be in that environment, seeing their peers do that, bringing in guest speakers that do that, could really change the way they structure their classes with a growth mindset, with emphasis on relationships, with spending time, making sure they have office hours. So that's something I hope that I bring to my school, we bring to our school.
I think for we've done a really great job with COPE and like the existence of peer educators in mental health and kind of helping the general student body acclimate to the diverse aspects of college, whether that's different socioeconomic backgrounds or different ethnic backgrounds. And I think one thing that we could do to kind of add to that is kind of pushing that peer-to-peer interaction where we really understand someone's backstory and how they've been navigating college throughout it. I think with the way that is, like the stereotypes that we have of being like a party school, we've really done a lot to change that though with the research that we do and a lot of our initiatives. But I think it's just really understanding like the diversity and socioeconomic backgrounds and what kind of creates somebody's story.
Well, thank you all. I could ask you questions all day, but I want to open it up to all of you who I'm sure have lots of follow-ups. So on that note, please raise a hand and we'll have microphones go around.
And if not, maybe we get to cold call for a change. Always want to do that.
Good morning, everyone. Just a question. If you could take a class on any topic you've ever been exposed to, what class would that be?
Can I answer? What if I've taken it? What if I've been fortunate enough to take it? I'm going to cop out and answer that way, and I'm also going to answer with two classes, so sorry. But number one, and ironically, could go on a whole rant about the design of government curriculum not being too applicable to actual policy work. The two most fruitful classes that I've gotten the most out of have not been within my major and have not counted towards a single degree requirement for me. Psychology of Persuasion and Influence, which was a 15-person class in the business school, all based on, I think it was Robert Cialdini's book, in case anyone's interested. Phenomenal book, yep. And so to get to learn that in practice in a 15-person class environment at a school where my classes are not normally 15 people was phenomenal. And secondarily, it was a communications class taught by a former representative who has become a really close mentor of mine, kind of hearing a little bit more in the classroom setting about the practicality of politics for a lot of people in that class. I know that was kind of their first exposure to, what is politics and policymaking actually like.
It's interesting. I relate to that, like your non-major classes, some of them actually being your favorite. It's interesting that happens. Both of my writing classes actually were my two favorite classes from, my undergrad so far. But I think if there's a class that I really want to take, and I don't know who would teach it, but I think it would be the art of teaching. I've had some teachers, some mentors, some professors, everyone from like swim instructors all the way to faculty that have really impacted me and that have showed me that teaching is not a science but is an art, and it's really dependent on the student and the amount you tailor the way you teach to a student. And in my few experiences being a TA or a peer mentor, I have realized kind of the impact you can have if you engage with that mindset. So I would love to learn more about that from someone who embraces that mindset.
It's got to be a hard one to teach.
Yeah.
I think for me, the two classes that I really would have wanted to take in my time at UM would have been philosophy of brain and behavior, which is kind of just examining the link between philosophy and psychology. And then I also would have loved to have taken psychiatric epidemiology and kind of understanding how mental health progresses in populations and how they come to start.
Hi, I'm so sorry. Is that okay? Okay. Hi, good morning. My name is Dustin from NYU. I just so appreciated, I'm here, I'm so sorry. I'm gonna stand. I am really curious about the comments that you folks made about belonging, and I'm really curious about how students shape campus culture. So the way that I wanna ask this question is that I remember when I was in college, there were a few organizations on campus that were selective or application-based, or students got to decide who were in them. And I know that in your comments you focused on more open enrollment opportunities to find belonging, but I remember and I see in our student surveys that those barriers of entry into selective student groups, business clubs, premier dance groups, right? Peer organizations, these can be quite selective and application-based. I'm curious about your experiences if you are in any organizations that have that process, or a very long rush process, or a new member period that might be helpful for us to know about as administrators.
Anybody want to pick it up? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a great question, and talk about an impact on mental health. We actually, one of my classes, we were doing like a SWOT analysis of like the business school, and this was kind of one of like the weaknesses that we identified was like the over-selectiveness of extracurriculars. Like there's this kind of like, I didn't end up doing a fraternity, didn't really want that full commitment, so I did like a business fraternity, which like I loved it. I'm like one of the only like non-Greek life kids in it, so like it was a good mix up of the social circle for me. But it is wild because I had no idea, and I'm glad I didn't know this till after I got in, was they had 350 applicants, all of which got interviews for 30 spots. It's like, and then interviewing the next, couple of semesters, it's like, how do you pick these kids? Like, you're denying kids with like a full ride scholarship for like outstanding stories or yada, yada, yada. But yeah, I mean, that's on the social, end of things. But even academic, like there's a lot of classes that you have to apply for at UT. We're really fortunate to have some great professors, probably most notably Matthew McConaughey, big application process to get in there. But, a lot of different practitioners in the political space. So it's definitely, as much as we like to embrace the Southern hospitality at UT, embrace the kind of, make your own way that Austin culture is, there definitely is a little bit of element, I would say more so in the business school, in some of the engineering schools around like a cutthroat environment to get extracurriculars.
Yeah, 350 and 30 is crazy. And it's students making those decisions
Silly. It's so silly.
It's like people that are 1 year older than you.
Yeah, literally. My interviewer was younger than me.
Okay, even better. Yeah, definitely the case in the engineering school. So there's this very, I guess, it's highly, like, everyone wants to be in it because it's so selective, which, I don't know. I don't know if that really makes sense to me. But it's called Makers, and it's an engineering kind of design club. And a lot of people apply, at least in the ECE, CS and MECI kind of groups, and not a lot of people get in. So I had applied my freshman year, both semesters, didn't get in, and then got in my sophomore year, first semester. And I think the main reason why they have to be so selective is because we don't have a lot of funding. And so the way they do it is we have small project groups, so probably 5 to 7 people per project, and we have 8 projects because that's all we have funding for. And so increasing our intake of students would mean either making those projects bigger, which would give each student like less of an experience, or less like responsibility in the project, or we need more funding. So that's just how, I guess, with this much funding, that's just all we can do. But other teams that kind of also help build a community. I'm on an a cappella team. We're limited by the amount of people we can take to competitions, right? So that's only 18 of us. So that's the maximum people we can take. And so that experience has been so great for me and such a transformational and, community building experience. But obviously everybody doesn't get that, right? So not everyone makes the team because they can only take so many people. And so I guess a lot of us are just frustrated that, we've already done all of this application to get into college, and then as soon as you get there, your freshman year, first semester, you're bright-eyed, bushy-tailed freshman, like walking through campus and going through the club fair, and you're like, oh God, I have another 20 applications, I can't do this.
And get your wallet ready.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like, these aren't cheap, unfortunately.
Well, thankfully for COPE, it is cheap. We don't actually have to pay for anything. But we even have our own interview processes. And I would say our only limitation is the fact that our counseling center, the room that we have our meetings in, is just small. In a perfect world, we could take all of these students because when we interview them, they have these amazing outreach ideas. They really have this passion for what they want to do, but we're solely limited by the seating capacity of our room. For this application cycle, we had about 71 applicants, and we could only take 15 of the 71. And in those cases, what we do is we have like a little wait list for our fall cohort, and we invite them to come in the fall instead of the spring so that we can make some room for them. And additionally, for some other students, we have them reapply because we know that they have a lot of strengths. It's just we're limited by the space in our meeting room. So it's not like we're having this exclusivity aspect. It's simply because we can't take you due to constraints. Yeah.
Mark? Or?
You know what, I'm being hot. I actually have a mic. I don't have to wait. First of all, thank you so much for taking time out of your incredibly busy schedules to come and speak to us. I don't know if there's any person on the planet that's busier than today's college students, and as you've reflected in your remarks here. So thank you so much. And shout out to Molly. I'm so excited. Molly's part of our team at Learning Well and is obviously doing a beautiful job here, as she does with interviewing students regularly for the magazine. So your voices are incredibly important. Keep them up. We'd love to hear from you in Learning Well. I wanted to ask a little bit more about the mental health work that is going on campus. Maybe not so much about the work, but how you guys are responding to what's going on with your peers. So you've talked each of you have talked about sort of this move towards individualism, right? In the sense that there's isolation and perhaps loneliness. We obviously hear about you guys all the time, and it's a big concern. At the same time, stigma around seeking support for mental health has decreased dramatically over the past decade. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about how mental health support among yourselves is sort of maybe different from that sense that we have, that everybody's sort of isolated. Are you finding that your community is more welcoming and you're more supportive of one another when it comes to mental health? Now, you're doing such great work with the peer-to-peer work, but the fact that so many people actually wanted to come in for limited spots is sort of a testimony to what I'm asking. Carson, I might start with you if you don't mind, because you're sort of in this both formally and informally.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's great to see you.
Same here.
And yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting, and I'd be interested to honestly get Anissa's perspective on like some more of the peer support, because I'm a little bit removed from that in the work that I do on the policy front. I think in my view, a lot of college students, with the exception of peer support, seek care in private. I would agree with you to say that if there's any silver lining out of COVID, it was definitely telehealth and the increased conversations around mental health. I think there are a lot of people that seek care anonymously, and I think telehealth has been a big driver of that. For example, unfortunately, there has been a relatively, probably statistically average, but nonetheless problem of suicide among students in Greek life at the University of Texas. Something that's often, not talked about too much. But it was interesting chatting with some of the leaders in kind of the IFC community about how they were going upon trying to redesign their approach, not just to what a fraternity experience looks like, but also getting their member support. And kind of the moment that really blew my mind was how so many of these students were not willing to go in person for counseling. Almost all of them wanted to use the third-party telehealth provider that the school uses because they, didn't feel like they could say, anything that they wanted to say to like a school official, which was really interesting to me. And I mean, that's just one subset of the population. But I think that a lot of people are favoring care that meets them where they are. And for students, that's best fit and sitting down in the, campus wellness center, in which, we're fortunate to have a pretty large staff there that does a phenomenal job. But then some students prefer calling hotlines. I mean, there's probably too many hotlines, if I'm being honest with you. I just got an email the other day. It's like, oh, we're launching this new hotline with Timely Care. It's like, how is that different than 988? How is that different than the crisis text line? How is that different than the UT hotline, which we have a whole, one just ran within the UT system itself. So, there's definitely so much there. But I think that there is an increased willingness to talk about accessing that care, which only helps drive the culture around it, which changes, I think, accessing that care and the health outcomes associated with it. Sorry if I kind of walked around the question a little bit. I hope I addressed it.
So if you want to add your perspective.
So kind of talking about that peer-to-peer aspect, what I've noticed is that for a lot of the students on the UM's campus, they are far more transparent about the struggles that they're going through, whether that's imposter syndrome or their difficulties at home. They're a lot more honest with themselves about how this is affecting them, and they're exhibiting help-seeking behaviors, or at the very least, the friends around them are exhibiting that, and that really influences the choices that they make. I've had a lot of different students from Greek life coming to me. How do I know when someone's in trouble? How do I notice the signs of suicide and depressive symptoms, things like that? And there really is this willingness to learn about it so that people can kind of be that support system for the people around them. And I think it's really beautiful kind of noticing that generational shift, because I know that for my parents, you don't talk about your mental health, you don't acknowledge those kinds of things, you kind of just brush it under the carpet. Whereas for my generation, we want to be more transparent and honest about what's holding us back and how we want to grow into better human beings by acknowledging how mental health is kind of influencing that.
Last one.
Okay, great.
Ooh, last one. Pressure. Thank you guys for being here. This is fantastic. My name's Reese from the Human Flourishing Program at Harvard. I want to talk about banning cell phones. Essentially, last night we had a speaker talking about attention and all these sorts of different issues. I mean, the question, I'll preface this by saying I'm a technology optimist. I have ChatGPT, Instagram, LinkedIn, they're on my phone, but my phone's kind of a chainsaw, right? It's also like a leech on my attention. It's like having 50 tabs open at once in your brain. How do you guys feel about even just the idea of making classrooms smartphone free? Do you think there are ways that we can improve this? It's obviously a drag on mental health as well as attention. So to build off of kind of the topic as well.
Francine, do you want to start? Yeah. First of all, you're doing better than me. I don't even have Instagram anymore, so yeah, I don't see a problem in banning cell phones in class, to be honest. I know that actually two classes that I've taken so far, the professors have very clearly indicated no cell phones in class, unless I say something absolutely mind-blowing that you need to tell everybody about. I think that it's definitely tests my attention span. If I have my phone, I mean, I'm sure both of you can relate. Like if I have my phone next to my computer while I'm working, I'm very inclined to just, because we're constantly receiving texts. Like that's the age we live in, right? Someone or the other is texting us or emailing us, or there's something we have to check super urgently, which is really not that urgent. And so I know that when I like keep it away from me, like a walk away or in the next room, that I'm way more productive and way more focused. So I think in terms of trying to get the most out of class, I think that's a great idea.
Any final thoughts?
I don't have a strong opinion on it, to be honest.
Well then. No. It's so tough, Reese. Like, I'm sure you see it. There's actually legislation in Texas right now that I believe, I might be wrong, that hasn't already passed the House of Representatives in Texas. It will in the next couple of days, banning cell phones in K through 12. I'm actually meeting with the brand new freshman legislator who's getting that passed on, I think, next Wednesday, which should be quite an interesting conversation. It's such a difficult question to grapple with, and I hate to give like the aspiring lawyer answer of it depends. I think that like the reality is like they're not going anywhere, and I think if we don't teach people, same thing with mental health, it's the same line of reasoning with mental health, we don't teach people how to deal with it and manage your consumption and put limitations, that it's only going to worsen the problem like when there's that access to it. But I also say that as someone who went to a high school that we weren't allowed to have cell phones in the classroom, and you know what? I loved it. It was incredible. I mean, the dialogue that you get from people, the level of engagement. Yeah, sure, kids are going to go to the bathroom and check their phones in the stalls and maybe get a detention for it, maybe not. But looking at Chancellor Grasso, but there's definitely some, there's definitely an incredible wealth of benefit to that, and something that we used to talk about in high school was like developing that ability of not getting in that gut reaction to check your phone only equips you to be a better person in the world, to interact face to face like we're all doing today. So I just argued both sides of the coin, right? So I'm really not giving an answer, but I think it's all about balance. I agree with the intentions of both sides of the policy, and think that whatever we do, we need to be incredibly intentional and purposeful in the outcomes that we want to come from any change and shift in policy.
A wonderful place to stop. Thank you so much. Please give it up for these wonderful future leaders.